All right, welcome everyone to Laketon Bethel. It's good to have our video audience with us. We have kind of a different day today in that we are ordaining elders and deacons. It's good to see everybody. My name is Sherwin, by the way, and you can find out much more about us by going to our website, laketonbethel.org. All right, so let's imagine it is 1982. The year I graduated from seminary. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, the Reformed Church requires a minimum of a Master of Divinity degree to get ordained as a pastor. And that was the year that I got mine as 82, and I was up to find a job as a pastor. Not really sure I wanted to do that. I was thinking to go on and get another degree, but I went into it. And it was so interesting because they don't prep you for dealing with church search committees. And so what I did was I talked to an older pastor who was ready to give me and a few of my friends advice on how to get together with search committees of churches. Now, there was a shortage of pastors at that time because the guys who went into ministry so they wouldn't have to go to Vietnam were kind of getting out. You know, they had their first synod meeting and they said, "It's not for me, I'm out of here." So they were finding different jobs and there was lots of openings. What this older pastor told me and my buddies was, get a dark suit, first of all. A nice dark suit with a standout tie, because then they'll think you're creative. And put an American flag on the lapel in case there's any veterans on the search committee. They'll like that, they'll notice that. And have a conservative haircut, which has always been something I've treasured. And no facial hair. You have to dress and look like this fella. And so look your best and then speak with kind of an ethereal language, an ethereal tone to your voice, like, "Oh, the Lord has motivated me to do," that sort of thing. Said search committees lick that right up. They like that. And he said, you're already a winner because you're white and you're male. If you were a person of color or female, forget it. You wouldn't get hired. Churches will not hire somebody like that. This was 1982, so we got to remember. But I thought, well, this is kind of a strange way that churches go about this. It did work. You get lots of offers if you look that part, if you try to look like this guy, which has never been a big goal of mine. But, when I worked for United Parcel, they at least looked at your work history and if you actually showed up for work and things like that. But churches tend to select pastors based on appearance. And that's part of the problem that churches have, is that it's often done just for appearance. We all tend to do that with different things in our lives, like women's shoes, for instance. I have never in my life, I don't mean to sound sexist, but I have never understood the logic for high heels. I'm told that the only men that really like these are orthopedic surgeons. Because why would you get something that you can't walk in, that's uncomfortable? It looks painful to me. You can't run in them, but looks are important to many. As just to level this off a little bit, guys, same thing. With the whole shaving routine. I've never understood that either. I have shaved before, but not recently. And I've never understood that, When I was working for UPS, I had to shave every day, and I thought, why do we go through this routine? It's a $1 billion industry with all the razors and stuff, and I personally prefer the Duck Dynasty look, myself, but we compromise. And then there's the whole thing about being thin. I ran across this quote this week. Americans spend more than $66 billion each year on weight loss products and programs, purchasing everything from diet pills to meal plans to swanky gym memberships. Now that's about 4 times what we spend on giving food to poor people as a country. So it's really interesting how we do that. And again, millions of dollars, billions of dollars spent on this, 66 billion. That's a lot of change. And, the nurse practitioner that was giving me a physical a couple years ago complained about my body mass index. And she said, you can do Weight Watchers, you can do all these other things, do bariatric surgery if you want. She goes, but then I'm going to tell you something you're not going to like. Or you could just eat less. It's up to you. Well, I've not had the best success with that, but hey, it goes that way. If we would all eat less and give the food away to those who need it, it'd be a better place. That's just reality. But it's kind of like, Americans are very sight-oriented, just like voting for president. For years, I could bet on who was going to get elected because I just asked a bunch of people who they thought was the best-looking candidate. And it's usually the one that gets elected. Just compare Kennedy to Nixon, if you want to think about that. It's often the best-looking one who gets in. Most of us look at appearances most of the time, and we're largely disappointed. You can't judge a book by its cover, and that's important for us to understand. Today, as we install new leaders, it's important to us as we choose leaders for the church that you go by a different method than what the world goes by. Today, we're going to look at an Old Testament story of the selection of leaders. Now, Israel, the nation of Israel, was still relatively young. They did not have a king like all the other countries around them did. They were ruled by judges, and these judges were appointed. Quite often they were prophets at the same time. And the judges just decided the cases when there was a dispute, and they occasionally even led the military if they needed to. But there was no king, no governor, no police force. And the judges settled the disputes that had to be settled. But the people wanted a king because the Philistines next door had a king, and the Ammonites had a king, and the Syrians had a king. So they wanted a king. They had to keep up with Jones's king. And God spoke to them through Samuel and said, getting a king is a bad idea. When you get a king, what's the first thing the king is going to do? Is he's going to send your sons off to war and they'll get killed. And he's going to tax you and tax you and tax you. But the people persisted. So Samuel, the prophet and judge, caved in. And they chose a fellow by the name of Saul to become king. And I've got most of these passages in your bulletins if you want to follow along, or they're up on the screen. But this is the selection of Saul that I wanted us to talk about. There's a wealthy, influential man named Kish from the tribe of Benjamin. He was the son of Abiel, the son of Zerar, the son of Bechorath, the son of Aphiah. I had to get a master's degree just so I could pronounce those. The tribe of Benjamin. His son Saul was the most handsome man in Israel, head and shoulders taller than anyone else in the land. So here you go. Bad recipe for a king. He's good looking and he's rich. And he inherited that all. He's a wealthy family, good looking and tall, and it went well at first. It really did. God had blessed Saul. Samuel anointed him. That little picture on the cover of your bulletins is Samuel pouring the oil on his head. And this is from chapter 10. As it progresses throughout that book in the Old Testament. As Saul turned and started to leave, God gave him a new heart. And all Samuel's signs were fulfilled that day. So things started off good. But then they went bad shortly after that. Seems that God had given Samuel instructions for Saul, and Saul didn't follow him. There is a menacing army approaching Israel, and the instructions to Saul was to go in there and obliterate that whole thing. Don't take any of the spoils of war. Don't take any of their wealth, but Saul did. And so he was in a little trouble with that. Samuel then confronts Saul and leaves him. And you have this, chapter 15. And Samuel went home to Ramah, and Saul returned to his house at Gibeah of Saul. Samuel never went to meet with Saul again, but he mourned constantly for him. And the Lord was sorry he had ever made Saul king of Israel. Now, this is New Living Translation. It's fairly accurate. You could also say it grieved God that he made Saul king of Israel. But all you predestinators, anybody here raised Christian Reformed? Oh, yeah, see, there's some of you here. You're getting vaccines for it? No, the thing is, those of us who are raised in this tight Calvinistic tradition really have a problem with that last sentence up there. Because if everything's predestined, did God predestine himself to feel sorry that he made Saul king? You know, so they have a problem with it. Predestinarians have a hard time explaining this one. But God regretted making Saul king, and he was disappointed. Now, when I read this passage, I just say, oh, I hope God's not disappointed in me. And I know I've been testing his patience for a good 50 years now, but I hope he's not too disappointed in me. So then, time goes on. David is selected as Saul's replacement. The problem of it is Saul's still in office. He's still alive. Normally, the new king wasn't picked until the old king died. So the Lord sends Samuel to Bethlehem. And yes, it's the same one, the birthplace of Jesus. And he goes kind of undercover. He says he's going to make a sacrifice to the Lord. He takes a heifer along. And he invited this man named Jesse and his sons to come to the barbecue, to the sacrifice. Now, Samuel was fully intending, he'd gotten a message from God that one of those sons was going to be the next king. So he's there and he's checking out, he's vetting all these sons. And this is the passage that I want to draw attention to. But the Lord said to Samuel, don't judge by his appearance or height, for I have rejected him. See, the oldest son came and he was apparently quite the hunk, as my daughters would say. Don't judge by appearance or height, for I have rejected him. The Lord doesn't see things the way you see them. People judge by outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. I think that's a powerful statement, and it's good advice for choosing church leaders. So here's what happens. The 7 sons are all checked out by Samuel. None of them. So he asked Jesse, you have another son, don't you? And he goes, yeah, I got one left, the youngest. He's out in the pasture with the sheep and the goats. And he was the one that was chosen. His name was David, the ancestor of Jesus, picked from the pasture. See, the world's standards are not the same as God's. You know, we tend to go by appearances all the time in this world. I like to watch movies. I don't like regular television because I can't stand the ads. But I like movies. And I thought, now, who is the highest paid actor right now in Hollywood? And so I Googled it, and that's what I found. It's Tom Cruise. Yeah, you knew that right away. Apparently, he did another movie, Flying Airplanes, and I don't watch those kind, but he is the top one. He's eye candy for a lot of people. And that's why he gets it. I don't think he's that good an actor. But he is got the right appearance, got the right looks. He looks kind of like a Reformed church pastor right there, doesn't he? And but we want eye candy for leadership, but that's not God's way. God is more interested in what you're willing to do. He's interested in your spiritual resume. So it's kind of like buying a car, too. I'm unusual. I like to spend about 6 months every time I need a car looking for one. And, I said, okay, I'm going to buy another mid-size sedan. I was driving a Honda Accord. I liked it. But I was going to try something different. I want a mid-size sedan just to run around town with. So how do I select it? Well, I go to Consumer Reports and look at which one is the most reliable. And then that's the one I get. I don't care what it looks like. But most people, that's just not the case. I hear of people spending $800 to put air shocks on an SUV so it can be raised up some more. I probably won't do that. But that's looks are not important to me in transportation. It's like, for me, it's like a washing machine. I just want one that runs. I don't care if it's going to, what it looks like. I think that God's the same way. He's not concerned about looks or charm. He wants people who will be reliable. He wants people who will report for duty. I reread a book this week I hadn't read in a few years called Autopsy of a Deceased Church. And it's really interesting. He talks about hundreds of dying churches in there. This fella writes from a Baptist perspective, but it's fairly interesting. He says, there's one thing that all dying churches have in common, and that is an inward focus. They're focused on not offending current members. We don't want Aunt Gertrude to get upset with us, so we're going to keep doing it the way we've done it the last 300 years. And that's kind of how things have run. So churches like that work on not offending the ones already there until they all die off and there's not enough money to pay the bills. Now the thriving churches, just the opposite. They all have an outward focus. Dying churches don't reach out. They don't invite people, and they don't help the community out. Dying churches are not going to bring food to hungry kids. That's just not something they do because that might offend Aunt Gert, and you don't want to offend Aunt Gert. So you do things the way it's always been done. I think what God is looking for is churches that meet people's needs. I think God wants churches that invite people to Him and leaders who have a heart for this. So let's report for duty. Right now, this is a pivotal time for the church. The past 30 years had more scandals than anything I've ever seen. It's amazing how many scandals you find out there, both within the Roman Catholic Church and with the conservative Protestant churches. Scandals like crazy. Our attendance was already lagging, and then COVID hit and just cut it right in half. If the church is going to survive, it's up to you. It is directly up to you. And collectively, it's up to all of us. And that's what I want to keep in mind as we do the ordination and installation today. So what I'd like to do right now is call the current consistory up, the consistory of 2023. So this is the current consistory now of Laketon Bethel. And what we're going to do, folks, is ask you a few questions. And this is how this works. A few vows. One is, are you willing to report for duty as leaders of Laketon Bethel? If so, say I am.
I am.
Are you willing to pray for God's vision for Laketon Bethel to become a part of your life? If so, say I am.
I am.
And do you promise to attend the meetings of the board and fulfill your duties as a leader? If so, say I do.
I do.
And do you promise to be actively involved in the life of the church and support the other leaders of the congregation? If so, say I do.
I do.
And as a decision maker and advisor, do you promise to seek God's direction for the future of the church? If so, say I do.
I do.
Do you promise to pursue with diligence your own spiritual growth so that at the end of your term of service you'll be a stronger disciple of Jesus than when you started? If so, say I do.
I do.
And now for you, the members of the congregation, do you promise to pray for your leaders and work with them as they seek to extend the leadership of Jesus through Laketon Bethel? If so, say we do.
We do.
All right. Now what we're doing is in the Reformed Church, you have ordination to the offices of elder and deacon. And we're given the authority by the classis to give that ordination to folks. And once you're ordained for life unless, as the old version of the Book of Church Order says, you commit a heinous and public sin. And I'm not sure what that is. I think it's spitting on the sidewalk or something. I don't know. But otherwise, you're in. So what we're going to do is we're going to install this group officially, and we're going to ordain 3 of them who have not been previously ordained. So I want to call the 3 of you out to step forward here a minute. And this is now Diana completely derailed me in the first service because she said, you were talking about 1982. That's the year I was born. Punk kids. But anyway, so you're going in as a deacon and you 2 as elders. And what we'd like to do is I want to invite everybody else who's ordained from previous years or now to come and stand behind you. So if I can get you just to move about a foot forward, and anybody else who's been an elder or a deacon can come up. Now what's unique about these 3 also, folks, is that I've served with all of their parents on this consistory. So these 3 are all second generation, and apparently it worked okay. So, all right. So, now if I can remember the line. By the authority delegated to me by the Muskegon classes of the Reformed Church in America, we do ordain and install you 2 as elders and you as deacon. In the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, amen. So you can consider yourself official. Yeah. That's all there is to it.